Good morning, good morning. You are in a power track on surviving high school, and then it says something about through the lens of 13 Reasons Why. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll start by just saying that my name is Keith, and I have the privilege of being the pastor at Grace Fellowship, which is a multi-campus church in Columbus, Ohio, and I have the privilege of seeing a lot of students come here. I think this is good Grace Fellowship clap. That was solid. Well done. I have the opportunity to be at Momentum over a number of years and be in different environments with the students here. I really believe in what this conference is about and really believe in you guys. So it's an honor to be here. My family of 6 is back home, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and then my wife and 3-year-old twins who will be 4 in September. And the oldest 2 are supposed to be praying for this right now, so Lord willing they are, as well as my wife. So I'm going to just start by saying, well, let's just go here first. How many of you have seen the show or watched the show regularly or connected to the show 13 Reasons Why? Go ahead and raise your hand. Just no shade, no one's trying to come after you, just kind of give you a perspective. Okay? Here's what I want to ask just a couple of you to say out loud as we get started, okay? Tell me why you liked the show or why you connected to it. Just whoever would say, be so brave as to say, I started watching the show and I liked it because, or I connected to it because. Just stand up, and I just want a couple of you to say why. Go ahead. Okay, so friends were watching it, told her about it, and then she felt a connection to one of the characters. Somebody else, why did you watch it? Go ahead.
I watched it because it really tackled the things that I think a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about, but a lot of people go through, and I wanted to see how they went about it. Okay, so good. Another perspective being that it's talking about things that often aren't talked about, that need to be talked about, and they wanted to see kind of how that stuff was navigated. I started to hear about this show through my oldest kid's school. They sent us an email and said, hey, this is this show that's out there. You guys need to be aware of it as parents. This is kind of what it's about. And so I started to Google and look at some things and eventually watched a couple episodes to understand what's going on. And then as season 2 progressed and I started to hear more and more about it, I ended up going, okay, let me connect and kind of understand to what's going on. Now let me just kind of get this out of the way. If you think this is going to be like a talk of me saying, in connection to 13 reasons, why you should or should not watch the show, that's not what this is. If you think this is going to be like me shaming you, telling you you shouldn't watch it, that's not what it is. We could have a completely separate conversation about the value of whether or not you should engage the show. Okay, we could have a completely different conversation about that. If you think this is only going to be a talk about suicide or mental health or mental illness, it's not going to be that. If you are aware of what the heart of the show is about, it basically builds around a girl named Hannah Baker, who's a high school student who ends up taking her own life and then leaves behind these 13 reasons why through cassettes for the people that are involved in her high school to hear what goes on. The stories of the 2 seasons deal with some pretty difficult things like sexual assault, rape, suicide, violence, drugs, sex, bullying, social media usage, friendship, depression, and all that plays into that. As I watched the first couple episodes of it I ever watched, the first thought that I had was, this is really well done. I was very impressed with the way they put the art and the story together. Now again, I could have a whole separate conversation if you just want to kind of know the jump and relate it to kind of the off topic. I would not want my high school kids watching that show. And I wouldn't let my high school kids watch that show. We can have a separate conversation as to why that is. That's not the heart of what's going on. But as I watched it, I thought 2 things. This is really well done. And the second thing is, I can totally see why high school students connect to it. I can totally see why high school students connect to this. Because every issue I just read that the show deals with is what you're dealing with. It's what you're processing. It's what you're going through. And so I can see why it would resonate.
But I also think that there are some really incredibly dangerous things that are being taught and presented in that show that I think that we have to be very, 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 very careful about. And kind of the most basic one, and then I'll kind of move to where I want to go, is I do absolutely think that it paints suicide in a light that is not healthy at all. I think it paints it and romanticizes it in a way that is not good and is not healthy. Now, on the other side, what I would say is it brings to the surface an issue that is absolutely real and maybe more real in your generation than it's ever been in the United States. They're doing some analysis right now on the 25 and under in our culture, non-Christians. And what they're finding out is that this generation of young people is actually statistically sleeping around less, is actually partying less, but that their vices are that they're more depressed, more suicidal, and more anxious than they've ever been. And I think this show gets a hold of that in a way that's very, very powerful. I think about my time in high school. I went to a public high school of about 1,000 people. I was involved in athletics. I was involved in extracurriculars, everything from I was in some plays to I was the leader of our fellowship of Christian athletes. And I think about high school is hard, and it was hard when I was in high school, and yet here's what I'll tell you, I think it's even harder now. I was playing golf with a friend of mine on the way over here yesterday. He's a principal of a junior high at a school district that is a pretty good sized school district, and we were both saying, he's got 5 children, and we were both saying how we would not want to be kids right now. It's really, really hard. It's really, really challenging. And I think about the importance of high school. I think about what that show, 13 Reasons Why, is going after and what it's displaying. And I really felt led to say, how do we take that show and the things that they're dealing with and create some things that are really important for all of us to think about surviving high school. Now, if you're a youth leader or a college student, I would say to you what I'm about to talk about right now also applies to you. I don't care whether you're a 40-year-old, 50-year-old person. It applies to you and how you survive and navigate life. If you've got a Bible on your phone or that you've brought, I want you to go to 2 verses, and I just want you to kind of hold your finger there as we think about moving through some of the thoughts that I want us to think about as they're processing what they process in that show. How is it that we make sure that we process the life that God has given us and live it in a way that makes sense, that honors God? If you've got John 10:10 and 1 Peter 5:8. John 10:10, 1 Peter 5:8. 2 singular verses that remind us of 2 aspects of our spiritual enemy, Satan and his team. And then part of those verses also contrast what we should be aware of as Christians and what Christ is trying to do in us. So John 10:10, if you have that, would one of you just stand up and read John 10:10? First one there goes. Stand up and read John 10:10. Thank you, Aaron's great. Go ahead. Okay, so the thief comes to steal and to destroy, but I have come so that they may have life and life to the abundant. So Jesus says, I show up and I've come to give you an abundant life, the life that you were designed for. Abundance isn't car stuff, popularity, prom king, make the team. It's not that stuff. Abundance is a relationship that is in Him, that is known by Him, that is known for Him, that loves people and loves others. He says, that's what I've come, an abundant life that you'd be able to experience joy no matter what you have. But then the enemy comes along and says, what I've come to do is to steal and destroy like a thief in your life. And so I want to tell you, it doesn't matter what season you are in. I don't care whether that season is 6th, 7th, 8th grade, whether it's high school, whether it's college, whether it's marriage or retirement someday. The enemy wants to take that season and destroy and kill amidst that season. It wants to keep it from being as abundant and life-giving as it's supposed to be. Somebody who has 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, just stand up and read that for me. 1 Peter 5:8. Whoever it is, stand up and read. Go ahead, thanks.
You too young, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming near.
Keep going for me.
Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door.
Maybe I gave you the wrong verse. Is that 1 Peter 5:8? liar. No, 1 Peter 5:8, that's not what I have. Somebody else have it? 1 Peter 5:8. Go ahead, read it.
Be serious, be alert. Your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for anyone to devour.
Okay, so be serious. Mine says be alert, be sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So the call is to the believer here that if you're a Christian, that you would be alert, that you would be aware. I think we all know what it is to be alert and aware. It's what most of us aren't right now on Friday morning. You're not alert, you're not aware, you're tired. You're in some ways disengaged. But here, Peter says to people who are, by the way, in a Christian culture that's being persecuted, that's being attacked, he says, be alert, be aware, be sober-minded. Your enemy, that there is an enemy of God, he moves around, prowls around, and he's looking like a roaring lion to devour people. I would venture to say that if, like, I had someone out in the hallway right there, and they brought in a cage with a lion, and then opened up the cage and it ran in here, we would probably all go, yeah, I'm out. Like, we probably would move away pretty quickly, because we would sense a very real threat, and we would want to do something about that, and we would be aware of that threat, and we would act accordingly. Some of you would feed your friend to the lion, some of you would run away, some of you would go upstairs, some of you would hide, some of you would quit, but you'd be aware of the threat. And Peter says, be alert, be sober-minded, be vigilant, be connected to the fact that someone is coming to destroy you. So listen to me. If you're a Christian, particularly a Christian trying to thrive, moving forward in a high school environment, in a culture that's constantly telling you God is stupid, in a culture that's constantly telling you to look at your friends and compare yourself to them, in a culture that's constantly telling you what you have isn't enough, you're constantly being sought after by the enemy to take your Christian faith and have it destroyed, to not have it be real. And so what does it look like if I was any of the characters in that show? If I was Hannah, if I was Jessica, if I was Clay, if I was Justin, if I was any of the Alex, I was any of those characters, and I would have said, I want to live as a Christian in that culture, in that context. How would I have done that in a way that would have kept me from being destroyed, that would have kept my life from being killed, would have kept my life from being stolen, that would have given me the abundant life? How should I have been aware and sober-minded? I was joking with someone a few minutes ago that I saw these banners up here, and I remember that, Wesleyan their mascot is the Wildcats, and my children have watched High School Musical over the years. And so, I looked up and I was like, oh yeah, that's their mascot, and I think the colors in the whole 9 yards. And I remember when my kids were watching that, and I remember looking at the characters, and I remember thinking this very same thing as I connected to 13 Reasons Why a little bit of, what does it look like in high school to say, no matter what high school I'm in, I want to live for Jesus. I want to honor God. I want to put God in front of me, and I want to live a life that honors Him and survives. And so I'm going to give you 5 things. Okay, 5 things, I don't care whether you're 17 or 70, need to be true to survive any season of your life. I'm going to give them to you, talk about them for a minute, and then we will move from there. Okay? Here's the first thing that the characters in that show, obviously because they're not Christians, didn't see, but even many Christians in high school don't see and don't do. So the first thing that I want you to write down is you need to stay rooted. You need to stay rooted. And if you want to kind of put a line of what I mean by that, here's what I'm going to say. You have to see yourself the way God sees you. You have to be rooted, stay rooted, and that means to see yourself as God sees you. Now, I often think when people say that, we kind of only see ourselves through a couple lenses. We either see ourselves as a sinner in need of God's grace, or we see ourselves as saved by God's grace. We simply see ourselves as a non-Christian or a Christian. And in one sense, those are very good, true, clear categories that we need to think about. But I want to encourage you to think about yourself in all the ways that God thinks about you. And that you're constantly finding ways to stop and process that. I heard a pastor say one time, the fastest way to forget what God thinks about you is to dwell on what everyone else thinks about you. I'll say that again. The fastest way to forget what God says about you is to think about what everybody else says about you, to dwell on what everyone else says about you. I wonder what the characters, all of them, not just those who ended up taking their life, but any of the athletes, any of those who did terrible things, any of those that sent pictures they shouldn't have sent, any of those that were smoking or drinking things they shouldn't have smoked or drank, any of the characters doing anything, saying the things they shouldn't have said, if any of those characters would have actually said, I'm going to view myself through all the lenses of the way that God sees me. I don't have time to go through all of them, but I want to suggest a few of them that would maybe help you not only see yourself appropriately, but as you see yourself, it will help you engage other people. I think the first thing that you need to remind yourself to stay rooted in is that God sees you as fearfully and wonderfully made. I know that in a conference like this and in a space like this, and sometimes even in our churches, I know that people say that or they quote that scripture, but like, come on, please hear me. The only one that can do you is you. There is no other version of you other than you. You were put here on purpose. None of you are an accident. I don't care what your story is of your parents or your step-parents or your mom got pregnant when she was too young or whatever it was. You are not an accident. You were put together by God on purpose for a purpose. And when you don't see yourself that way, you're going to end up being in a bad place. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And God has said the world needed you. And when people start to go, and I'm going to get to this, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, very real, very serious, very much need to be addressed. But part of what happens when that goes on is the thoughts that consume your mind suddenly consume you, and you start seeing yourself through a lens that's not actually the way God sees you, and you need to stay rooted and recognize you have value. You matter. You have gifts. You have something to give, not only your church, but your school, where you work, your sports team, your neighborhood, the social media community. You have something to contribute. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. The second thing that you need to remind yourself to stay rooted about who you are is that you are an image bearer of God. That you were put here, and we're going to talk a lot about this tonight, that you were put here to reflect God, so that when people see you, they would see God. All of creation screams and brings glory to God. And I'm going to hurt some of your feelings here for a second, okay? But you are more important than your dog. You're more important than a horse. You're more important than any other creation. You're more important than the trees. All of those should be honored, taken care of. But humanity is a prized creation of God, made in the image of God, whose job is to reflect. People see me, they get connected to God. And I wonder how you would view your high school experience differently if you said, I'm an image bearer for God. I'm to reflect God. I think the third place you need to see yourself is that even though you've been redeemed by God, and even though if you're a Christian, God's record is now your record. You're fully saved, you're fully redeemed, you're fully forgiven. The truth is you're still a person who struggles with sin. You know why that's important, that you still recognize that you're a person in need of God's grace? It's very difficult to become prideful to other people when you recognize you still need to be forgiven. And you treat other people and their mistakes with a lot more grace. But you need to recognize who you are. You need to recognize that you're someone that is here to give God glory through being an image bearer, that you're a sinner still saved by grace, or a sinner in need of grace, that you're someone who has shown up to tell people about who God is, that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You need to be reminded that you're someone that was sent to be a co-creator with God, to bring glory to God through the things that you do, to leverage your skills and gifts in a way that people would say, I see God through those. All of that is to say, you need to remember that you have infinite, infinite, infinite worth. They always talk about worth is determined by the price that someone will pay for something. I have a friend who I've gotten to know pretty well over the last 18 months. He's an ex-NBA player. His last contract he signed was for 8 years, $96 million. He's very, very wealthy. He's a businessman. He's a God-fearing, very godly Christian guy. And we were having breakfast at First Watch probably about 6 months ago, and he normally drives this ridiculous, fully loaded Range Rover. But this time we came out in the parking lot, and I was going to my used Honda Accord to get into it. And I was looking for his Range Rover, and I said, Mike, where's your Rover, man? He said, no, I drove something different. Well, between my Accord was a Honda Odyssey minivan, and then on the other side, when I walked around it, was a brand new loaded Ferrari. And I was like, I hate you, Mike. I hate you a lot. And we were chuckling, we were talking about it, and I said, Mike, we've been friends for a little while, right? We're allowed to ask each other anything, right? How much did that cost? I didn't know if we were that good of friends that I could ask that question yet. But he told me. And it was really, really expensive. And then I said to him, well, that's how much you paid for it. Like, how much is it worth now? And he looked right back at me and he said, it's not worth even half of what I paid for it now. And it was like less than a year old. And I said, why? He said, well, because it's been off a lot, and I've driven it, and these things have a value that decrease very, very much. And so he said, the book on it, how much it's worth, is about this. It was still a really big number. He said, it's about this. And then he looked at me and he said what I just said a few minutes ago, which is he said, but ultimately, it doesn't matter what the book says, it matters how much someone will pay me for it, because that's what it's worth. I say all that to say to you, if any of you are questioning what you are worth, you need to remember the price that was paid for you. And it was paid for you while you were yet a sinner. While you were driven off the lot, broken and damaged and messed up and screwed up, God said, I love you, I see you, I want to offer you forgiveness. I wonder how your high school experience would be different if you would stay rooted in who you are and you would see yourself as having worth. Here's what I know. If you saw yourself as valuable in the sight of God and the way God saw you, you would stop competing to be loved and adored by other people in your high school. I'm going to tell you right now, competing for the affections of people is exhausting. And the moment they take it away is the moment you feel like your life sucks. Don't start there. Start with staying rooted in who God says you are. Number two, I think the principle to survive high school and to survive any age and to overcome being pursued by the devil and to give life to other people and to yourself. Number two is you need to speak wisely. And you need to understand that words have power. You need to speak wisely and remember that words have power. Jesus' brother writes the book of James, my favorite book in the New Testament. My oldest son's middle name is James. All my friends think it's because of LeBron James, that traitor, but it's not because of that. It's actually because of the book of James and the way I read and understand and love and connect to that book. But in the book of James is virtually an entire chapter that basically says the tongue, the mouth destroys people. Nobody can contain it. It sets entire forests on fire. It turns large ships. It is this small thing, your mouth, that has powerful, powerful consequences. I want you to ask yourself, in general, your words at your school, to your friends, over text, on social media, do they build up or do they tear down? What's absolutely true when you watch 13 Reasons Why is that it reminds us of the power of words. The power of words and what people will internalize and think and how they will view things. I was talking to a girl one time in our church. She's a young adult and a godly young woman. And I was talking to her a little bit about her story. And she was telling me about some things that she had to overcome. And she really was one of those people that wanted to please people, wanted guys particularly to like her. She had a real low self-image. She didn't stay rooted in the fact that she was worthy in front of God. And I said to her, hey, I know this is probably a hard question, but what do you think is the kind of the genesis of the origin of some of your lack of self-confidence? And she laughed, and I said, what? She said, I can tell you the day. I said, what are you talking about? She said, I remember we were in 7th grade, and the teacher was taking attendance. And the teacher was saying our names, and they would say, Joe Smith, and you would have to say here, and you would, Susie Jones, and you'd have to say here, and Bill Parker, and you'd have to say here. And she said, I stood up to say here, and my voice cracked. And for the next 3 days, people came up to me over and over and made fun of me. She said it began to create doubt in how I even saw myself simply because of the way I said one word, the word here, and my voice cracked, and the things people said. And so then people started to make fun of her about that, and then whenever it happened, it kept going. And so she said, whenever I was in a class for the rest of my life, through college, and we would have to give attendance, every single time they would get ready to say my name, I would have social anxiety about the fact that I had to say the word here, because someone said back in 7th grade, when you said the word here, you sounded like an idiot, and that was all I heard in my head. She said one word in 7th grade, it created a narrative that people said about her, and that she said to herself, and it affected her until she was 25 years old. I bet some of you, the things that you play over and over and over in your head are the things, only the negative things that people have told you. And we often remember what we should forget and forget what we should remember. Your words have power. Do they inflate? Do they deflate? Do you speak kindly to people? Do you speak graciously to people? Are you someone who tears people down? Do you build people up? Do you look for ways to encourage? Like really practically, I would just encourage you. Here's a practical thing that I try to do every single day. I just, in my mind, I say, Keith, every day you need to send one text that is explicitly kind to somebody. One text. On purpose, that the only reason I send it is to be kind. To try to build that. One time during this day, Keith, find someone that you would go and say, the power of words matter. How do I build that up? Sometimes that's my kids, sometimes it's my wife, sometimes it's a coworker, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a stranger, but your words matter. What is absolutely true in 13 Reasons Why is that the words of the people affected not only Hannah and Alex, but all of them. And the words you speak to other people matter, and the words that people are speaking to you matter. Do you understand the power of your words, and do you speak wisely? I'll say this. You'll never be short of influence if you're someone that's an encourager. You'll never be short of influence if you're someone that's an encourager and learns to speak wisely. Number one, you survive high school by staying rooted, seeing yourself the way God sees you and knowing that you have worth. Number two, you speak wisely and understand the power of your words. Number three, you have to have perspective. Have perspective. And what I mean by that is that recognize that things will change. Alright, this next one isn't going to be one that's going to be fun for a lot of you. This one that I'm talking about right now, this idea of have perspective. Because I have to do something kind of simultaneously that's difficult to do. Which is I have to hear this. I have to legitimize your current situation while telling you, listen to me, that your current situation isn't the end of your life. Stop it. Okay? Hear this. What you are going through right now, I don't want to minimize, it's real. Some of you are going through real stuff with your family, real stuff with friends, real stuff in your own soul. And I know that it's like a really big deal whether you made the team or you made the squad or you made homecoming court or you didn't. I know it's a really big deal the way people see you as a Christian or not a Christian. I know it's a really big deal the way you think. And I know that you think that what's happening in the social media world about you or in your text, kind of group text as a 16-year-old is like all that life has to offer. But I'm telling you, it's not. It's not. And I know the thing that you're impacted by, you think is the most important thing, I'm telling you, and if you don't believe me, go ask your youth workers. The things, for the most part, that you think are a big deal today will be irrelevant in 5 years. It won't matter. The guy that you think is the most important guy in the whole world, and if he would see you and smile at you and laugh at you, it would just make your life perfect, you won't even think about him in not that long. The thing that someone mocked you about that you thought was a big deal, that you think everybody remembers and cares about, nobody will care. My oldest son, he has this kind of like hypersensitivity to being embarrassed in public. I don't know what it's about, but he hates, like, if we're at, say, a restaurant with wings and he gets wing sauce all over his face, I'll look at him and I'll say, "Hey, you need to go get wing sauce over your face." He's like, "Dad, why are you embarrassing me?" Like, no, you're embarrassing yourself when you walk around with teriyaki up to your ears. Like, it's ridiculous, buddy. He's like, "Why are you embarrassing me? All these people heard you tell me that you need to, you're embarrassing me." And I look at him all the time and I say, "Caden, nobody cares about you that way. Nobody does." And he'll say to me, like, 2 weeks later, sometimes 2 months later. In fact, we were in Florida and we were on a charter fishing boat, he and I, and something happened that I had to correct him on that charter fishing boat. And it was like 18 months later. And he said, "Dad, do you remember when you embarrassed me about that? I think the captain on the boat is thinking about it." I said, "Caden, the captain on the boat doesn't even remember you existed. He doesn't care, buddy." Because here's what I'm going to tell you. You think people are thinking about you when they're not. I'm just going to say something in love. You're really important to God, but not everyone thinks you're as important as you think you are. And you think about yourself way more than other people think about yourself, and you are worthy of infinite value to God, but the idea that people are sitting around going, yeah, I just care, I care, then you are creating things that you think matter now but will not matter in a short time. And here's what I'm going to tell you. For most of your worst situations, they're going to change. That's why they're called valleys. Because valleys have beginnings and they have ends, and you get through them and you come out of them. So I know for some of you it's like, yeah, Keith, but if you just knew what they were talking about in that thing, have perspective. God's not done writing your story. You're going to change. Here's what I know. Some of you, you're really glad that people don't think of you the way that you behaved when you were a freshman, now that you're a junior, because as a freshman, you were kind of a jerk. Or you were not kind, or you were rude, and you changed, and other people will change, and your situation will change. And so you need to have the perspective that God is still writing His story and writing the story in your own life. Sometimes when you go to a museum and you look at a painting, you might kind of get consumed really close with the brush stroke that's like just happening in front of you and try to understand it. But the beauty of painting isn't just that you see the brush stroke, it's that you step back and you see the whole picture. God is doing something bigger than just being 15 to 18. And you've got to trust it, and you've got to have perspective. Speak wisely. You've got to stay rooted. You've got to have perspective. Number 4. This is one that I think the folks, again, they didn't, in 13 Reasons Why, they didn't have perspective. They thought all that was about their life was going to consume them to the point where they made permanent decisions on temporary realities. Number 4, you have to be accountable. You have to be accountable. And this is going to get a little bit heavy for a second, but you need to be accountable. And what I mean by that is you need to acknowledge what you do and don't do matters. What you do and don't do matters. You need to be accountable that the mean words you say matter and they hurt people. You need to be matter that when you're a young man and you take advantage of a girl, it matters and it's wrong. You need to be accountable to the fact that when you allow yourself to binge watch things that are unhealthy, that it matters. You need to be accountable to the fact that you disrespected that person in the cafeteria is wrong, or that you're rude to other people on your team. You need to be accountable and recognize that what you do or don't do matters. You need to take responsibility for your actions. I think one of the greatest faults of our culture right now is that we are a culture full of blaming other people. Sometimes your situation is your situation because you chose it. Not always, but sometimes. Sometimes you did hurt the other person in their situation is because you were rude. You hurt them. You need to be accountable. Accountability is so important in all of life, but you need to be accountable and acknowledge what you do or don't do matters. I think one of the things that 13 Reasons Why captures is that the people realized that the things that they did that were really hurtful, they didn't address them when they should have. I think one of the things that always bums me out when I do funerals, and as a pastor you do a fair amount of funerals, is that number 2 and number 4 show up far too often. Oftentimes, the nicest things that a person ever says to another person are when they're dead, which is wrong. And oftentimes, the first time a person takes accountability for the lack of things they did in someone's life is when they're gone. And yet, I would suggest that if you're going to not just survive but thrive in high school or any other age group, you're going to be accountable, not only with your words, but your actions and your attitudes. You're going to tell people the good and the bad. You're going to love them in the good and the bad. And you're going to recognize that what you do or don't do matters. Number 5, you're going to stay rooted. You're going to speak wisely. You're going to have perspective. You're going to be accountable to your actions. Number 5, you're going to get help. You're going to get help. I want you to write this down next to get help. Getting help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Getting help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Mature, intelligent people who understand that everybody has problems and struggles and failures and weaknesses, admit what they can do and go ask other people for help. It's a big audience. Mathematically, the stats say that in our church or in a room like this, a little over a third of you are on what's called a psychotropic drug. Psychotropic drug is a drug that has been prescribed by doctors to deal with the biochemistry in your brain regarding depression, anxiety. In this room, the stats say that over a third of the girls either have been or will be molested, raped, or taken advantage of sexually. And not just a third of the girls, but a fourth of the guys. The stats say over 50% of the guys, at least, I'm being conservative, have a pornography problem, and the girls, it's 30% and rapidly growing. The stats say over a third of you have already shown your body fully naked to someone, either through a text, through a snap, or you've already been sexually active. Statistically speaking, in a room like this, probably 40% of you come from divorced homes, maybe a little bit less. All of that is to say, there's a lot of garbage, a lot of junk, a lot of mess, which there was in the high school, in the show, a lot of mess. The challenge was all that mess drove people inward rather than to other people to go and get help and to say, what's going on? How do I process this? I don't know what it is you're dealing with, and I don't know if it's overwhelming, but I beg of you that if you need help in any area of your life, go ask. And I'll say this, and the people who are in ministry in another church who want to come and tackle me afterwards, that's fine. But if you're a part of a church or a ministry where you ask for help and they won't help you, that's their problem, not yours. I'll speak to those students and leaders here at Good and Grace. You ever have a real issue that you need help with, and you come to us and we don't help you, that's our fault, not yours. You are brave when you admit pornography. You are brave when you admit that you're depressed. You are brave when you admit that you're struggling with sexual identity. You are brave when you admit that you have suicidal thoughts. You are brave when you say, I am really angry at my parents and I want to process it in a God-honoring, healthy way. When you say, I'm angry or resentful at my friend, you are brave when you go get help. That's what the body of Christ, the Word of God, spiritual leaders are there for. When I was 15 years old, getting ready to get my license, my mom said, hey, there's an opportunity that you could go be a part of if you want to be a part of it, where there's this Mothers Against Drunk Driving seminar they're doing, and then they're having you as a kid, as a 15-year-old, you get to drive a car for 2 straight weekends, learn how to do it, and you do these kind of car drills with cops to learn how to drive ahead of time, and it's like a safety driving class. And I was like, sounds cool, I can drive a car fast, when I have a license, I'll go after it. But to go do it, I had to listen for 2 different times for talks. Mothers shared the story about their children who had been killed by drunk drivers. It marked me immensely as I listened to these moms tell stories about their children who were dead because people drove drunk. And here's what I remember thinking, even as a 15-year-old, that bummed me out the most about the whole situation. They were both preventable. Both cases, the people that hit them that drove drunk were alcoholics. In both cases, alcoholics that had hit them had hidden their alcoholism and had become what we call functional alcoholics. They knew how to live in a way that they didn't have to address it and deal with it. And I remember thinking the tragedy of those young kids could be alive had the people admitted that they had a problem. In the story in the show, that girl could have been alive had she really sought help. Other characters could have had aspects of their life go different directions had they sought help. Some of you are going to get married and you're going to think it's going to go great. You're going to be married for 5 years and it's really hard. And what I'm going to tell you is don't be afraid to go get help. Some of you are going to realize you're going to be 30 years old and you're going to realize, man, I got a lot of junk in my head I've never worked out. Go see a counselor, get help. But some of you right now, you're depressed, you're anxious, you're addicted, you're lonely, you're sleeping with someone you shouldn't be sleeping with, you're hiding stuff that you shouldn't be hiding, you're posting stuff that nobody knows about in a sense for validation, and what I'm begging of you to do is to go get help, to go ask, to go say I'm struggling. Now, if you're someone that really has mental health issues, anxiety, depression, you're suicidal, I am sorry, listen to me, that the church at large has not addressed this fairly well. I'm sorry. And I want to say that I hope that there's a day and age coming where the church will be more aware and sensitive to this. But I want to encourage you to go home and get help. Admit it, address it, deal with it. Let me say this and then I'll be done. Nothing good grows in the darkness, guys. Nothing good grows in the darkness. Bring it out. I wonder how Hannah Baker's life, how the students of that school in that show would have processed and dealt with everything from rape to sexual assault to suicide to violence to drugs to sex to bullying to social media to friendship to depression differently. How they would have brought abundant life to it. How they would have been alert and aware that the enemy wants to take life from you had they stayed rooted in the worth that they have in God and seen themselves the way that God sees them. Had they learned to speak wisely and understand the power of their words. Had they had perspective that what exists right now will change. Had they been accountable to say what they do to others and what others do to them is real and needs to be addressed. And had they, in the middle of pain, gone and gotten help. Can I ask all of you to bow your head right now for a second, and I want to have kind of an honest time. And I'm just going to work my way through these. And I want you to be honest. I don't want you to acknowledge or connect to all of them for a second. I want you to think about, of those 5, which is the one that you would say really kind of resonates in your soul the most. I just want everyone's head bowed and eyes closed for a second, and I just want you, if this is you, that I want you to raise your hand that this has been impactful to understand this thought to help you survive this season of your life. If of the 5, the thing that you need to be reminded of or encouraged with this morning is that you need to be rooted in the fact that God sees you as having value and worth, and that's the one of the 5 that impacted you the most to think about, just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. All right, go ahead and put it down. The thing that you needed to be reminded of this morning is that my words have power, and I really need to think about the power of my tongue and my speech, and I need to speak wisely, and you need to be reminded of that. Raise your hand. That's you. All right? Again, I don't want you to vote twice, just you. If this is the thing you need to be reminded of, is that you need to have perspective that things will change and what you're facing now will shift. Would you raise your hand if that's you in that category? All right? If you needed to be reminded that you need to be accountable and acknowledge that what you do or don't do matters and there are consequences to yourself and others, would you raise your hand? And then lastly, if you've been challenged or shaped to think about the fact that getting help is a sign of strength and not weakness and you need to get help, would you raise your hand? All right, with eyes bowed and heads closed, what I want to ask you to do is whichever one of those you said impacted you, I want you to tell someone who's a leader from your youth group that. And I want you to tell them that you recognize that that thing you need to really address as you go back home and try to survive the next year. Father God, we know that you're a God who wants to give us life, that wants to give us hope and purpose and direction. God, we look at that show and we see so much dysfunction and lostness. We see an enemy who is seeking and devouring, stealing, and destroying. We don't see an abundant life, and we don't see a group of people who are aware and sober-minded about how to honor you. May the students in this room who know you and follow you be alert and aware that the enemy wants to take their life, their joy, their hope from them, wants to make their life just survival and not something that is thriving. So God, I pray that you would give them the courage, the clarity, the revelation, understanding to know who they are before you. That you built them and created them on purpose for a purpose. That you came and died for them to reflect you. That you would help them understand the power of their tongue, and you would help them to speak words that lift and build others. That you would help them to have perspective that while they are in a valley now, the valley will come to an end and they will end up on the other side, and what matters now probably won't matter in the long term. So help them think eternally and not temporally. God, that you would help them to be accountable and recognize that their mind should be fixed on things above, not on things below, and that what they do matters and impacts other people. And God, that those who are hurting, who are depressed, who are suicidal, who are in addiction, the Spirit of God, you would give them a spirit of power, not of timidity, to be brave and to seek help. And God, when all of this is done in our lives, the stars of our high school or the stars of our seasons would not be us or our youth group or our church, but would be you. And that you would be known and seen. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.